Okay, we're good. Let's begin our discussion of for this year. Chanukah, there is so much to talk, it's hard to know exactly what to pick on Chanukah. There are so many topics. There's so much Torah related to Chanukah, but basic questions of Chanukah that have to do with the essence of the holiday. It's not just a holiday that we ask many questions on that day, like Pesach, we ask many questions, but it's a holiday that there are questions about the essence of the day, including why did we need this holiday? Or why isn't this holiday mentioned in Tanakh? Well, these are basic questions, but we'll start with another one of them, and that is the Gemara in Shabbos Chaf Aleph, as we're familiar with. Shabbos Chaf Aleph. Why isn't Chanukah in Mishnayos Keseder, except for 8 Derech Agav mentions? Why does it have to be in the Gemara and the brachas in Shabbos and not in the Mishnah? Those were all wonderful, amazing questions that we're not going to deal with, but we're going to deal with the following. Right? The Gemara tells us in Shabbos Daf Chaf Aleph the 3 levels of Neris Chanukah. Tana Rabbanan, mitzvahs Ner Chanukah Ner Ishu Beisa. The mitzvah of Ner Chanukah Ner Ishu Beisa. I have to switch. I see I'm on the wrong internet in my house, the weaker ones. I'm just going to try to switch it, and if I lose you, I'll come. Just got to switch it. I don't know if that means I lose, but let's see if like switch and just it could be seamless. We're just trying to see if that works. Okay, everybody with me still?
Yep.
Everybody still with me? Okay, we're still here. Okay, I just noticed that. Anyway, so we have the 3 levels. Mitzvahs Chanukah Ner Ishu Beisa. V'hamahadrin. The mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is one candle per night in each house. V'hamahadrin, those who are mahader and want to glorify the mitzvahs, ner l'kol echad ve'echad, ner per person in the family, which means if you have 5 people in your family, so it's 5 on the first night and 5 on the second night and 5 on the third night, all 5s. Same just for family. V'hamahadrin, min mahadrin, and the super duper mahaders. So as we know, machlokes b'shamai omrim, yom rishon madlik shmona, mikan ve'elech poches v'holech. B'shamai says 8 to 1. Ubeis Hillel omrim yom rishon malagachas mikan ve'elech mosef v'holech. Beis Hillel says 1 to 8. I think, did we have a shir last year in Chodesh Shvat about Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Lishitasos, like 5 or 6 of them, and Beis Shammai went by potential, and therefore the 8, 7, 6. I don't remember. I think we might have had that shir last year. But either way, now we're going to talk about it from a Chanukah point of view. And that is, we have the 3 levels here, and we know machlokes what the reasons are for Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel going 1 to 8 or 8 to 1. Is it just simply Keneged Yom HaNechnasim and Keneged Yom HaYotzim, the days coming in, coming out, or is it something more substantive? Beis Shammai Keneged Parei HaChag, connected to the Karbanos of Sukkos. There's some type of connection between Chanukah and Sukkos, and Beis Hillel Ma'alin B'Kodesh Ein Morid. Fine. What's very interesting is that we have these 3 levels in the Gemara, and you would have thought that the Shulchan Aruch would quote the Gemara. The Shulchan Aruch would tell us, 1 candle, and if you're Mahader, Ner l'kol echad ve'echad, and if you're Mahadrim and Mahadrin. No, the Shulchan Aruch just quotes Mahadrim and Mahadrin. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't even quote Ner Ishu Beisa, and that's unusual. The Shulchan Aruch usually tells us what the halach is, that you could be super at the Shulchan Aruch in Tafresh Ayin Aleph, in Ilchas Chanukah, source number 2. Ma Neris Malik. What do you like? So give me 3 levels. No, every Jew is Mahadrim and Mahadrin on Chanukah, right? Ma Neris Malik Echad Mekavelch Mosef Olech. And that's our question number 1. Why is it the Shulchan Aruch reflects that we do, all Jews are going to do Mahadrim and Mahadrin here, right? We're not settling for anything less, right? We're all going above the call of duty. What exactly is that? What's the message for us? Number 1, unlike Hilchos Shabbos, right? Hilchos Shabbos, there aren't so many levels of that we would say. Just again, I want to look at, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Shabbos in Reis Samach Aleph, just looking right now, right? How many candles do you light? Reis Samach, where is it? Reis Samach. That's the time per halakas neiros. And let me just find it if I can find it now. If not, we'll leave it. Says the Shulchan Aruch right? When to light, and let me just find who lights Reish Sama Gimel here. Reish Sama Gimel. Yezor Lasos Ner Yafa. Light a candle. The Yesh Mechav and Lasos Shtei Psilos. Some light two. Keneged Zachar v'Keneged Shamar. But the Shulchan Aruch says the Iker din is one. Right. So the question here is, why does it skip to the next level up? Question one. Question two. Again, another famous question, and that is exactly what is the purpose of this holiday? There are really two focuses and two answers to that question. As we know in Al Hanisim, it's all about the military victory. Right? It's all about the war. That's what Al Hanisim focuses on, while the Gemara in Shabbos Chaf Aleph, source number 3, just focuses on the oil, the Neis Pach Hashemen. Right, B'chafei B'Kislev Yomei Dechanika Tvani Yinun. There are 8 days of Chanukah. Lo Lemispe Baho, no eulogies. Lo Lasanos Bohem. Sheniknusu Yivanim Lahechal Timu Kalashmanim. When the Greeks came in, they impurified. They were matame, defiled all of the oils of Shagavar Malchus Beis Chashmonai. And when the Chashmonaim won, V'Nitzchum Badchu V'Lamazol Pach Echad Shel Shem, and they only found one. She'emuna B'Chosama Shel Kohen Gadol. They only found one. What exactly is the significance of this Nes? The war, we understand, Hodah. But what is the significance of the Nes Pach Hashemen? So a number of suggestions given. One is Tosfos, based on Tosfos. Tosfos says on that Gemara, Chaf Aleph, source number 4, in Kvar Gazral Anachim Lios Kazavim Tzarach Lomar She'emudach B'chosam B'karka Shloisitu B'hakli. For halachic reasons, they found the bottle, they found it buried in the ground. They found the cod, the cruse of oil, buried in the ground. That's what Tosfos says. How'd they know to look there? You go into the Beis HaMikdash, you look around, there's no oil. What, start digging? That reflects how much the Jews wanted to do the mitzvah in a l'chadchila way, and that's what we're celebrating. One idea. We focus on the oil because that represents Mesiras Nefesh. We didn't take no for an answer. We didn't give up. We're going to find something. We're going to find something. One idea. But maybe there's another idea. Right? The Ramban reflects that, right? Remember this Ramban at the beginning of Parshas Baaloscha, where the Ramban, based on the Rashi in the beginning of Baaloscha, what is the first few psukim of Baaloscha doing there? Baaloscha Saneros. What's that doing there right after the second half of Naso, next to the Nesiim? Because Rashi quotes Lafisha Kshara Aaron Chanukah Sanesiim, when Aaron saw the consecration of the Mishkan, Chol Shadaitu, we got very sad and depressed. Shalo Haya Imaim B'Chanukah Lahuv Lo Shifto. His shevet was excluded. Levi didn't bring anything. You go through every shevet. Right? They're all there, but not him. Hashem says, don't worry about it. I have something even more special for you. Even more special. And what's that? Right? I'm going to let you light the candles. That's even better than bringing the karbanos. And the question that the Ramban asks is, why was this such a great nechama? Right? You want to say, you're going to do the most special avodos? There's a more special avoda that Chazal tell us. Right? And that's the Ketores. Right, the incense. So why did he comfort him with the candles and not with the Ketores? Isn't that the most special? So some say, again, this is a second idea about what the oil is about. Oil does not mix with other liquids. As we know, when oil and water are put in the same cup, the oil flows to the top. Maybe that's a reflection of our victory over Yavan, that we don't mix, we don't mish, we don't integrate into the values of the culture around us. Maybe that's a second idea. What about the oil? So one, maybe it shows how much we wanted it, right? We dug deep down. Number two, maybe it reflects that we're separate. But the topic for today's shir is going to be a third idea. Maybe there's another story. There is another story in Tanakh having to do with oil. And maybe the secret of that story could give us an insight into the secret of Chanukah. And that's the story of Elisha and the poor woman that didn't have any money. Right? Malachim Beis, Perek Daled, you have it there in source 6. Remember the story of Isha Achas, the wife of one of the Nevi'im? It doesn't say it's explicitly in the Psukim who it is. It could be, according to Chazal, the wife of Ovadia, the Haftorah for this week. Right? We learned the whole Sefer of Ovadia this Shabbos. So Isha Achas Nevi'im, she cried, Avdacha Ishi Meis, my husband died. Va'ata yadata ki avdacha yoreyas Hashem. You know my husband was Yirei Shamayim v'anoshe ba, and the creditors are coming, and my creditors are going to take my 2 kids. Shnei Yeladei lo lavadim. Elisha says, okay, I'm going to help you. V'yomer elei Elisha ma'aselach hagiti la ma'yesh lach babayis. I want to help you. What do you have in your house? Just tell me you have anything in your house. I have a little bit of oil. That's it. A little bit of oil. Elisha says, okay, great. Go to all your neighbors, gather as many containers and cups and bowls, whatever you can find, right? Go to Costco and buy them all out. Go everything, just get every container and have it all set up in your house, right? And then close the door and start pouring. Right? He does, turning the page, right? And then finally all the containers are filled. Bring me more. And her child says, there's no more. There's no more. The nay stops. The nay stops. She came to tell Elisha about the nace. He says, good, go sell the oil and go to your creditors and take your children out to dinner. That's the nace that occurred with the oil. And the question that's asked on the story is, why did Elisha ask her what she has in the house? And she says, I have a little oil. And then she started pouring. Right? Why did Elisha ask her? Why'd she need that? Why'd she need that? Right? So the Mefarshim explain, because Hashem needed that to do, Kaviyachol. Hashem needed that to do the nace. That little Pach Shemen, just like we have our Pach Shemen on Chanukah, right? She had her Pach Shemen, and that was the cause of her nace. But why did she need it? Why did Elisha said, okay, get the containers and take the empty oil bottle and start pouring it? Hashem would do it. 3 suggestions to answer that question. But those will also relate to our Chanukah story. Okay, and this is the shir. Okay, the parallel between the little cruse of oil in the Elisha, Isha, Aniya story and the Chanukah story. As we'll see, there's a parallel between the two, right? And that's the story in Tanakh about the little bottle of oil. Chanukah didn't make it in, but this story did. And we're going to learn messages from this story, 3 messages from this story that's going to help us appreciate the Chanukah story. Number one, the Zohar tells us, and the Taz, deals with this idea as well. The Zohar tells us in source number 7, bracha, and you probably have heard this, bracha is not chal on an empty kli, right? She needed the oil to create more oil. Says the Zohar. Maksiv, I'm giving shot on this pasuk. I only have a tiny little oil, enough to smear on a little finger. Right? Elisha says, good, you have a drop? Great. Because bracha does not fall beduchta rekana on an empty spot. Since you have little oil, so bracha could be chal. Bracha could be chal. What does that mean? What does that mean that bracha, and the Taz quotes the Zohar. The Taz quotes the Zohar in source number 8, right? To answer the question of the Beis Yosef, which we're not getting into this year either, right? Of why Chanukah is 7 days, 8 days and not 7. They had enough for the first night. So the Taz explains the fact that they found the little oil. That's the nace, because there wouldn't have been a nace had there not been any oil, like the story in the nace with Elisha, right? The Taz quotes that in source number 8. If even the first night the whole thing would have been used up with nothing left, then the second night would not have been able to have the nace. You needed a little bit left. So there was a nace even the first night that it didn't all burn. Not just finding it, but didn't all burn. And therefore, that's how you know, because you needed that to have the bracha. What's the message? What's the message that bracha is only chal on something that's already there? Rev Rimon suggests in source number 9, maybe this reflects the idea that Hashem likes to clothe his miracles in nature, or at least minimize the miracle. Ba'ofan pashut mashmos hadavar shakadosh baruch hu wrote l'rotza l'chol hanisim b'derech yesh mi'ayin. To have a nace yesh mi'ayin, an empty bottle creating oil, Hashem would rather not do that. Hashem could do whatever he wants, but Hashem would rather clothe the miracles in the natural. V'gam b'nisim yesh adifus l'shmar ad kama shenitan al tiva shel olam. Hashem would rather, guard and keep the nature of the world. Right? Think about all the great miracles that happen in history. They're almost all yesh me'ayin, yesh mi-yesh. Right? Hashem split the water. Hashem killed the Mitzrayim. Hashem stopped the sun. They're all yesh mi-yesh. Right? Maybe the purpose of life is Hashem wants to minimize, so we recognize him even without yesh mi-ayin. We recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu's involvement to recognize the nisim within Teva, to recognize the miracles that are not open miracles. If it was yesh mi'ayin, wow, that's obvious. Hashem minimizes, so to speak, the miracle and clothes it as much as he can, even though it's miraculous. The message for us being, recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu even in the Teva, or even in the hidden miracles. And that, of course, is made famous by the Ramban in source number 10, which we have discussed here in this forum in the past. That's the Ramban, a long piece at the end of Bo. I just gave you a little bit of it. In source number 10, remember that context, the Ramban is discussing why there are so many mitzvahs that are Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, like many, like 10 to 15. Why is it so important? The Ramban explains because Yetzias Mitzrayim was the most miraculous time period in Jewish history. But Hashem's not interested in doing miracles all the time. So he just reminds us to remember that time, but throughout history, is to see God through nature. Umin anisim agdolam hamaforsamim, and says the Ramban, through remembering the great miracles that took place, adam modem benisim hanistarim. Says the Ramban, one is modeh to the hidden miracles. Shehem yisoda tarakula. Right, that is the yisod. She'ein la'adam chelik b'toras Moshe Rabbeinu. A person doesn't have a portion in the Torah of Moshe ad shenamin, until we believe shebechol devareinu mikreinu shekulam nisim ein mem teva minhaga shel olam. Recognize your life is a bunch of running miracles. Or as I like to say, Mother Nature has a father. Right? There is a power behind, and there's nothing that just happens. And that's the message of the oil. You have to have yesh miyesh. A little bit of oil, start pouring. Rav Dessler writes, right? There's no difference really if you're looking into your backyard. Looking into your backyard. Let's say it's an even bigger miracle. If you think in Chutz La'aretz now where the ground is hard and cold, you look outside and all of a sudden, let's say you see the ground rumbling. And all of a sudden, you see you see a finger come out of the ground. And then a hand. And then an arm. You witness Tchias HaMesim. That's not going to happen in Chutz La'aretz. But you witness Tchias HaMesim. Wow, unbelievable. You're going to faint. You're not going to believe it. And yet, if you look in the ground and the ground starts shaking and all of a sudden you see a leaf come out of the ground. And after the leaf, a little branch. And after the branch, a thicker branch. And then you witness a tree growing. Says Rav Dessler, what's the difference between a tree growing and Tchias HaMesim? Says Rav Dessler, from Hashem's point of view, nothing. Neither of them. What, you put a seed in the ground, it makes sense that a tree comes out? Mitzidenu, it's what we're used to. It's what we're used to. We're used to Teva. But the difference, says Rav Dessler in source 11, we're not used to people coming out of the ground. We're used to Tchias HaMesim of trees. We're not used to Tchias HaMesim of people. But really, there's no difference. We have to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Teva, and maybe that's message number one of why you need a little nace. Need a little nace, or I should say, to minimize the miracle. And maybe to connect this to Chanukah, I didn't give it to you, but the Maharal writes, maybe that's why we had two miracles by Chanukah. We have the miracle of the war and the miracle of the oil. Why? Because one might have thought erroneously, if we didn't have the miracle of the oil, right? The Yeshua's kasha, we could just use tamei oil. We might have thought erroneously, wow, the amazing power of the Jewish army. Amazing, the strategy, and that's all it is. That's all it was. No, Hashem gives us the miracle of the oil, so this nace is megala on the other nace. To recognize that the Jewish people's army, yes, we have to do our ishtablis and push and support and do everything we can, but it's with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always behind us, and that's why the nace of the oil says the Maharal is megala on the nace of the war. We should recognize that's also a miracle, and that's all the same idea. The same idea of recognizing the miraculous within the nature, and that's number one why she needed a little oil. She needed a little oil. Number one. Message number two. Why does Hashem need a little bit of something to put bracha on? And it can't go on something empty. Hashem only gives bracha if we take the first step. If we bring the kli and start pouring, then Hashem's going to make it not stop. We have to take the first step. That's the beautiful story in the Medrash Koheles, in the beginning of Koheles Rabbah, in source number 12. Right? We have Medrash Rabbah on the 5 books of the Torah, Bereshis Rabbah, Shmos Rabbah, and on the 5 Megillas. We don't have Medrash Rabbah on Nach, but except the 5 Megillas and the Medrash Rabbah. So here you have the story in Koheles Rabbah, the beginning of Koheles. Ma'isa Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, line number 2. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, Shara b'nei Iro ma'alin nedar v'nedav Yerushalayim. Everybody in the city was going up to Yerushalayim to bring stuff to the Beis Hamikdash. Amar hakol ma'al Yerushalayim nedar v'nedavos. And he says to himself, everybody's bringing v'ani eini maladavar. I have nothing. Man, I have nothing. Remember, Achim Medosa, he's the one that was very poor, and the golden leg came out of the heavens. He says, I have nothing to bring. What am I going to bring to Yerushalayim? Ma'asa yatsa lemidbar shaliro. He went out to the desert, out to his backyard. V'rasham even achas. He saw a big stone. V'shivava v'sitata umirka. He shaved it, and he smoothed it, and he shined it, and he's like, okay, I'm giving this stone to the Beis Hamikdash. Right? This is a great story, by the way, to tell your children and grandchildren when you lie down with them. You don't have to tell them Little Red Riding Hood and Goldilocks right here. This story right here, among many other Talmudic stories. We can just take Gemara. Talmudic stories, there are enough of them. Bikesh Liskol Apolums, he has this big rock and he wants to bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. And it's huge and it's very heavy. He needs workers to help him. So he finds 5 people. Right? Could you help me bring the stone to Yerushalayim? Amrlo, sure. How much? 5 slime. Pay us first. We'll help you. Nimsa. He had no money. I'm sorry, I have no money to pay you. Okay, we're out of here. They leave. Over and over again, nobody wants to help him. And he gets very despondent. He doesn't know what to do. Finally, Hashem makes 5 angels come in the form of people. Could you help me? They said, sure, we can help you. Give us Chamei Slime. He says, right? You could pay us. You need to pay us. You pay us when we get there. But you know what? But we can't do it alone. You put your hand on the rock too. You help. So he said, fine. He puts his hand on the rock, and all of a sudden, he finds himself in Yerushalayim. And he looks for the workers. He wants to pay them. Nothing. He realizes that they were angels. But Hashem wouldn't do it unless he put his hand on the rock, unless he helped out a little bit, unless he started pouring the oil. There's no bracha unless you take the first step, right? That is the key in Avodas Hashem, right? And that's what the Gemara says. Gemara says in Nida, right? Somebody could do Daf Yomi for 7.5 years and not make it to the second to last Daf in Shas, which gives us this message, the only place where this appears in all of Shas. Nida Daf Ayin Aleph. The Gemara says there, Ma'yasa Adam Yachkam, source number 13. How does a person become wise? Amar Lohen Yarbe B'Yeshiva V'Yimai B'Schora. You got to sit and study. As they become wise, right? Don't spend all your day in business. Amru Harbi also came to the whole club. Many did that. Many sat and studied. Oh, you need the other ingredient. And you got to daven. Hishtabus and tefillah. That's what life's about. Hishtabus and tefillah. And that applies to wisdom. That's number one. That applies to children. And that applies to money, children, and what's the third one? Yasel abundant. Right. The first one was Yarba and wisdom. Wisdom, children, and money. All of those, you need both. Hishtavlus and tefillah. And that's our message. That's our message. We need to take the first step. It's not just prayer, it's action. And it's not just action, it's prayer. We need to team up with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Reb Soloveitchik writes this also with many examples of HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do it without us, right? We got to take the first step. Isn't it interesting, right? HaKadosh Baruch Har Sinai, we got the Torah, Kabbalah Torah, Hashem comes down, and yet, if we knew where Har Sinai was, or we were able to go to Har Sinai today, we could go on it. There's no more Kedusha. And yet, Har HaMoriah, Har HaBayis, you can't go on, right? What's the difference, right? Har Sinai, because Har Sinai was all from God. The higher level of Kedusha is where we team up with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We do. Avram did that. That's Yitzchak. And bring Karbanos. Says that's the difference. And also just one more application of this, and then we'll get to the third idea. And that is, when we have an apple. You have an apple, bar creates. After you have an apple, what do? Make a bar nefashis. It's pretty short. And what about bread? Right? Why do sometimes we don't wash? Because we're Orthodox Jews. FOB, fear of benching. Right? So we don't wash because we don't want to bench. But the question is, only certain fears that we can understand. Right? FOBF, fear of being fleshik. Different certain hanas that only Orthodox Jews can understand. Right? All of a sudden you hear of a chassan in the shul right before V'hurachum. There's few hanas that only Orthodox Jews can understand. Okay, whether they're appropriate or not, but either way, ask Reb Soloveitchik, buy an apple that came straight from Hashem. I didn't do anything, and he gets a bar nefashos. Hamotzi, I took the wheat and I ground it and I kneaded it and I baked it. And that's 4 brachas, says Reb Soloveitchik. Exactly. Because when you team up with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you start and Hashem blesses your actions, that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate bracha that we can have. And that's why she needed to pour a little bit. She needed to pour a little bit because that makes the difference. And that's what we did. That's what we did b'shas Chanukah. We didn't take no for an answer. We went above and beyond. Hashem, we are doing it with you. And maybe that's why the Shulchan Aruch only quotes Mahachim and Mahadrin. Not the first step. We're not taking a back seat here, right? We are doing whatever we can with all the hidurim. There is mandated hidur when it comes to Chanukah. We know we need to do our part to be zocha to his brachas, right? We had to find the pach shemen. She had to start pouring with the pach shemen. Message number 2. So again, number 1, why do you need the little candle? Because Hashem wants to be memait the nisim, right? To cover it as much as possible, if possible. Number 2, we have to do a little bit on our own. And again, there are so many stories and examples of this, as we know, Rachmana litzlan, over the past year, where there are those that teamed up and took the step with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Third and final answer. And Rav Rimon says, yes, that's such a beautiful answer. On the last page, source, second to last page, page number 5, source 15. Maybe there's another idea. What do you have in your house? She says, I have a little oil. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only going to give us bracha when we first recognize the bracha that we already have. If we recognize that we have a little oil, then Hashem will give us more oil. Yitachen lahasbir ba'ofen nosaf. Kedei she'Kadosh Baruch Hu yashre bracha b'masa yedei adam. For us to be zoche to Hashem's bracha, alav lahakir b'dvar matovim sheyesh lo. We have to recognize what we have, as small as it might be, because maybe it's not. Shalavu yodeh lahakir tova. If I can't see and recognize and thank for what I have, Hashem's not interested to give me more. Like a parent. Parent gives a child something. If a child's doesn't recognize what they have already, a parent's not interested in giving more. First, recognize what you have. Hashem wants to give us more bracha. If we recognize the brachas that we already have, so then he'll give us more. You have a little oil? Great, I'll give you more. Misha lo yodea, line 11. Misha lo yodea laharich ulahakir toda dvarim ktanim. If somebody doesn't know how to recognize the what he had and saying thank you for the little things, enenu zakay lakabel shum davar vade lo dvarim gedolim. We have to recognize what we have, right? A little bit. A little more gabi lo araner mishigom lener lahairis libenu hulo akesef shalana lo yofi. What do we have? What lights up our life? Rev Ramon says, not our money, not our beauty, but histaklus shalanu ala dvarim. It's how we look at things. It's all about how we look at things. We can look at not ein kol babayis asuch shemen. There's always a little bit. There's always a little bit of bracha. Rav, in the Haggadah that they put out from the Chavetz Chaim's Torah, he says that we have this minhag, goes back a long time, say a lot of harachamans after benching. Harachaman hu yimloch, and we ask for things. You find a sinim b'chavod, hu yishbaru leinu, kumiyos lartzeinu. Why do we do that after benching? We ask for all these things. And give a bracha to my parents and to my children and to the balabayas. What are we asking for all these things for? The Chavetz Chaim says, because right after you bench, what does benching mean? You recognize the brachas that Hashem has given you. Hashem is ready to give you more. And once we recognize that, Hashem has his heart open. He's like, okay, what more do you want? What else do you want? That's why after benching, because benching b'mahus is we recognize hazanas olam kulo b'tuva. Who hativ, who meitiv, who yetiv lanu. Once we do that, then Hashem wants to give us more. And that's why the Ramban says Ammon and Moab are not allowed to marry into the Jewish people, because they're missing this midah of hakaras hatov, this midah of recognizing the good. And we also see this in Chanukah, because I don't know if we would have been there, the Chashmonaim, we would have found this little bottle of oil. What would we have said? Oh man, there's only one little bottle. We need more. Forget it. One little bottle. So tiny, so insignificant. Only one night. What they say? Wow, we got one. We're going to light it. They recognize the bracha. They recognize what they had. It's interesting. If you look in the Rambam, as we know, was not only a genius. He knew every single piece of Torah up until his time, but he also was an genius and amazing organizer and creator of areas of halacha that didn't exist before the Rambam. Many of the areas of halacha, as I mentioned this in the Shiurim, Hilchos Mamrim, Hilchos Shchenim. There are some just creations of the Rambam, which we're all used to now, but Sefer Avoda versus Sefer Karbanos. Like, what's the difference? The Rambam splits up. Yochid, Sibur, Mechusrei Kapara. The Rambam has, but anyway, where does the Rambam, so it's not only what the Rambam says, but it's how he says it, where he says it. Hallel. Where does the Rambam put the laws of Hallel? So if you would have asked me, where should it be? Right, you can only ask this question of if you have a better place to put it. Right, I once heard that from Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik. I took a few courses with him in my graduate degree. So he says you can only ask on the Rambam, why is it here if you have a better place to put? So here I have a better place to put it. Where should Hallel be? Hilchos Tefillah, part of davening. Put Hallel in Hilchos Tefillah. And yet Hallel is in the middle of Hilchos Chanukah. The middle of Hilchos Chanukah, the Rambam puts Hallel. You have it there in source 18, 19. What's it doing there? Because Chanukah is about recognizing what we have and giving thanks for what we have. Hallel v'hodah. What does the Rambam say? The holiday is to lahodia hanes ulahosif b'shevach hakel. Right, to be mosif in shevach. That's what we need to do. And there is so much that we do have. There's so much that we don't have, but there is so much that we do have. And we recognize that. And this time, with all the difficulties and the challenges that our nation is facing and going through and the uncertainties, Chanukah is a time to grab onto certainty, grab onto the brachas that we have in our homes, in our families, in our spirituality, in the generations that we have. And just as we know, I think I might have mentioned in the previous shiurim, again, Rav Rimon, I heard him say this twice, and maybe you've heard him say it too. He said, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have given me the choice at the beginning of time, to be zapped into any generation that you want. You choose the generation. I'll zap you into Avram Avinu, into the Rambam, into any. Rav Rimon says, maybe a year and a half ago, I would have chosen, I don't know, maybe first 20 years. He says, now it's clear. This generation, this door of connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in ways that no other generation is connected to, in terms of bringing salvation for the entire Jewish people, acting on behalf of Am Yisrael on such a national and a global scale. This generation where we hear the footsteps of Mashiach, where we hear it, we just need a little more achdus and a little more being together and a little more supporting each other. And in that way, we should be zocha to recognize the brachas of Chanukah. Again, the three reasons why we needed a little oil in the story of the Elisha and the woman. And those three messages are also the messages of Chanukah of why oil is the focus of the holiday, right? To cover and recognize Hashem's nisim within Teva. To take the first step, we got to start pouring, or to recognize the brachas that we already have. We should be zocha to fulfill all of these mandates and all of these privileges that we have with this holiday, and be zocha to see nisim. Kasher asis lavosenu bayem mahem bazman hazeh.
Amen.